In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
You might remember Memphian coach Bill Courtney from the Oscar-winning documentary Undefeated. Now, he's got an awesome movement and podcast called An Army of Normal Folks that you can check out at normalfolks.us.
I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're very pleased to be talking with artist Tad Pierson, so stay with us for a conversation with Tad. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Youth Villages. Tad, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
You do a lot of different things. Tire art, there's a project we're going to talk about, a project that you worked on, American Dream Safari, the indoor trailer park. We'll kind of try to get to all of it because I just met you as best we can tell, although there was some talk that we met when I was drinking. Yeah. But we'll just kind of, we'll assume that didn't happen. Because the more we talked through that, it was Jamie, it was not you.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're off to a great start. And tell people who you do tire art. What does that mean?
Well, Eric, I'm a self-employed entrepreneur. So I have to wear many hats, But my initial, endeavor was my tour company called American Dream Safari. Yeah. I've got a 1955 Cadillac. I like to say that the highway is my home. I give cultural tours around Memphis and the Mississippi Delta. And I suppose that environment led me to being exposed to a lot of tires along the highway and doing something with them creatively. And so I kind of started this little side art project 20 years ago, just painting tires. Started out kind of slow, but garden planters and just, funky stuff. I'm a real fan of trailer park art, and county fairs and weather vanes made by folk artists and stuff like that. So it kind of had that influence, and that's where the tire art got started.
And people have seen it's on Broad Avenue.
We have an installation on Broad Avenue of tire bike lane barriers made out of tires, which is held up nicely. And the city's now approved 6 more miles, and we're starting on Mississippi Boulevard, installing between Crump and South Parkway, Mississippi Four-Way Grill. Jesse's Place, a blues club along in there, kind of Lemoyne Owen College neighborhood. And
people can see your stuff. What is it on Facebook at Tire Art Design?
Tire Art Design, TAD.
So we'll TAD.
Yeah.
So, but talking it through, I've seen them on Broad. I was up there the other day, and they're kind of shaped into humps, and they're sort of painted, and they are both. I hate the word decorative. But
that's it. Well,
and also useful.
Safety, I think is a key part to them. Not to slang the competition, but if you've seen the white plastic poles that stand up straight, they're not particularly beautiful. They're functional. There's another company that has these kind of humps that are hard rubber painted black and white. Not particularly beautiful, but function well. So I think that's the advantage of the medium that we're working with on those bike lane barriers is, one, they're recycled, and tires are, ubiquitous, and they're flexible. When you stand there or you see them kind of going down in the distance, that it's a wave pattern, and it's attractive and I think somewhat beautiful.
It also fit. On Broad, it totally fits on Broad.
I think so.
And more so than the more kind of industrial, or not even industrial, the kind of ordered online polls you're talking about. There's nothing inherently wrong with them, but they're not in any way sort of in keeping with the vibe of Broad Avenue or the Arts District or Midtown.
I think so. I think you're right. Broad Avenue has emerged as a kind of a creative center, and so the streetscape should reflect that. Kind of an artsy neighborhood.
You're holding, again, I think people can see this at Tire Art Design on Facebook, but you're holding I thought it was just a strip of a tire. Then I realized it's a bike tire, and it's kind of cut into the shape of a tie.
Yeah. Well,
And you said that you were selling millions of these. Yeah, I think that's what I heard.
I said they're flying off the shelf.
Oh, really?
I sold 2
hangs
last week.
off of your shirt. I didn't. Wow, that's pretty tricky.
Well, Eric, you may be too young to remember when the craze of clip-on ties were, the rage, So anyway, one day I was just goofing around with bicycle tires.
Yeah.
And they're easy to cut. You can cut those with scissors. They don't have any steel in them. And so I just started making, and they're kind of a little clip that I can buy at Home Depot. And I glue them on.
Yeah.
And they're kind of a hoot, people. When I wear one out, people go, "That's cool," and then they do a double take, like, "Is that what I think it is?" So it's a tie made from bicycle tires. So my range is vast.
Yeah. So you talk about cutting tires, like the car tires and the steel in them. So this is a random. I had a little PTSD reminder when I was younger. My parents owned a construction company for many decades. They sold it and since passed away. But the original construction company was out in the Pacific Northwest, and they built docks and floats. So for parks or for individual homes, they ultimately would build boathouses. And for when they bought the company from someone else, they used tires, car tires, or truck tires, bigger ones, that were wired together into two, so they're stacked, and then filled with foam. And then the idea was that the tire was pretty indestructible. So the docks do float when they had these tires. They're like grouped under in these kind of pods, and they would hold up, walk on a big, heavy duty docks and floats. And I spent summers and after school, and you talk about cutting tires, you would have to wire them together. So you had to kind of you would drill through the sidewall and then wire them. And it is unbelievably hard. Yeah. So the idea of even working with these things to make even the simple bumps is daunting.
Yes. Well, the technical side of the tire art is kind of fascinating. If you look into it and how many tires we produce, Mr. Goodyear develops a chemistry, the ability to vulcanize rubber in the late 1800s, and that's the big game changer that makes rubber hard. And then the modern tire that we know today starts early 1900s. Then the steel belted tires come in the 50s, and now that's really what we've got. And those are the ones that the Brooks Art Museum a few years ago had an artist named Shekiah Booker, and she was a tire artist, but she cuts, manipulates, and makes horses and big sculptures. Well, cutting these tires is a lot of work. So the sidewall doesn't have steel in it, so you can knife through that. Or in my building prototypes, I could slice through that. But then when you're cutting through the tread, you're cutting through steel, and you have to really cinch the tire down and reciprocating tire saw. Yeah. Metal saw. Yeah. So you're cutting through metal. Yeah. So, I think working with this medium, tires don't dissolve. They don't go away.
That was my experience working with them in construction.
Yeah, no, tires built in 1910, if they haven't been, probably in the dirt for 100 years or something. Yeah. But they still are basically recognizable as a tire,
Again, we're here with Tad Pierson. You can learn more about his work at Tire Art Design on Facebook. And we're going to talk about American Dream Safari and some of the other stuff you do here in a minute. But is there, how much of a conservation, environmental part, how important is this to you? Or is that a simple byproduct of the fact that you're reusing some of the tires that just otherwise go into landfill?
It's an important statement to me in my personal ethos. I'm an environmentalist. I'm a brick hugger. I'm a tree hugger.
I've never heard brick hugger.
Well, I preserve. I like to preserve old buildings and the history of things. That's part of the statement. I'm not in your face doing it for environmental reasons, but how big of an effect does it have? Let me lay this on you. Currently, right now, about 6 major companies make all the tires worldwide. Right now, we're making about 2 billion tires a year. Yeah. When we do 1 mile of road with these bicycle lane barriers, we're doing about 450 tires per mile.
Yeah. So,
So
I mean, but
it's
still
a drop in
statement,
the bucket.
at least an
But
awareness of the people.
Well, I think it shows people that tires are sort of a scab, tossed off, thought of to be dirty. They just don't dissolve. They're mosquito breeding, so they have a bad rep, well deserved, but they just don't dissolve or go away. So to get rid of 450 tires, even in the city of Memphis. You can drive down Chelsea Avenue and a used tire place probably has 300 sitting there ready to go.
Right. You mentioned the mosquito part, or they collect water or all that. How do you make sure that doesn't happen with the art you're doing? And I think you talked about, maybe it was before we started, in terms of sometimes you use whole tires, and that's what people think of as the thing that can collect water, mosquitoes, and trouble.
Right. Well, in some of my designs, I use the whole tire. If I use the whole tire, I take about an 1.5 inch hole saw and just cut through the sides, 3 holes, and then flip it over, and then it just drains.
Yeah.
The tire design that I created for the bike lane barrier, we cut the sidewalls off both sides. That leaves a ring with just the tread. Then we cut through the tread and lay it out flat. And because it's steel belted, the tire wants to retain its curve.
Gotcha.
So we're just laying it flat, but it wants to curve. So that's what kind of naturally creates the wave or the curve. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm kind of manipulating the material in the way it wants to behave anyway, so.
One more really wonky tire question.
Yeah.
Once you open them up, all that steel in there, does it not rust?
It's covered. I mean, the steel is internal.
So a little bit gets exposed, maybe sometimes in the cutting.
On the very edge, on the very end, yeah.
I mean, it is both the horror of these things being forever items and also kind of amazing to work with.
That's what's kind of, sort of not stumbled into it. When I started painting tires, my big breakthrough in the tire art world was, just pouring a lot of paint on tires and really working them down into the tread pattern and just one color tires, And then one time I was messing around with a paint roller and I'd painted the tire one color and then I rolled over the top with another color, and that made the tire tread pop out as a geometric design.
Yeah.
And then it started to get kind of fascinating because when the tire is just black, driving past you, you don't see the tread patterns. But when you two-tone it, suddenly you see these geometric patterns that I'd like to find the engineers in Akron that, create those geometric designs. And for what reason? Is it to push the water away?
Right.
Is it aerodynamic? Is it,
I can remember Goodyear. I think it was Goodyear that had the ad that they would, I remember as a kid, it was fascinating to me that they would roll the tires over a glass with water and you could see the water, and it was like showing you the science of the tread.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mom, we need those tires.
Well, there's got to be somebody in the Firestone company that's their job.
Yeah. Again, we're here with Tad Pierson, and we'll come back and talk more about his work, his art, some of the things he does. But I'll remind everyone, this is The Sidebar. It airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. I'm Eric Barnes, and the show is focused on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. It's not just a radio show, though. It's one of a number of weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Memphis Grizzlies podcast, our Tigers podcast, the food podcast Soundbites, hosted by Holly Whitfield. The food podcast also airs on WYXR every Thursday at 11. And we also host the podcast version of Behind the Headlines, the TV show we produce with the folks at WKNO every week. You can get all those wherever you get your podcasts. You can get them on the Daily Memphian site. And the 2 WYXR shows you can also get at WYXR.org or download the WYXR app. It includes all the shows that WYXR puts together, not just the talk shows, but also archives of the music shows. So it's a great way to keep up with everything that's happening on WYXR. Also, WYXR is nonprofit, listener-supported radio. So if you're not a supporter, consider becoming one. The support, whether you buy a membership or you do a one-off donation, that is what supports and makes WYXR possible. The Daily Memphian, also a nonprofit, primarily supported by paid subscriptions to our content. So if you're not a paid subscriber, please do consider becoming one. You can also do a donation, a recurring donation, a one-off donation. All of that goes to support our newsroom of nearly 40 people, the largest newsroom in the region, and really one of the largest nonprofit local news sites in the country. Recently on the sidebar, we had the head of the American Bridge League, which was totally fascinating. I could still be talking to her. It was really great. It doesn't matter if you like bridge. It was just an interesting conversation about the history of games and their role here and a tournament they had. And she was just a fascinating, the head, Branya, was really, really fascinating. We also, a few weeks ago, had Jen Andrews, the head of the Shelby Farms Park Conservancy, which I mispronounced approximately 10 times during that interview, which was fun for everyone. I mentioned behind the headlines. We recently had CJ Davis a couple weeks ago, the Memphis police director. We've got coming up this week a conversation about that. We actually, a version of this conversation we did on the sidebar back in the summer is restaurants are closing, but also opening. And so Holly Whitfield joined me with Mary Oglesby from Mary's Boat and Cameo. We had Monique Williams, Chef Mo from Biscuits and Jams, and Tim Barker, who ran Edge Alley and has been involved with other restaurants in town, all talking about how restaurants close, how restaurants open, some of the dynamics. And then we piled on Houston's, and it was pretty fun. That was actually pretty fun. It was one of the more fun segments of Behind the Headlines in the near 15-year history. You can get those, again, as podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also go to Daily Memphian to get those videos or go look for us on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, we recently had our Women in Business seminar and the video of the speakers. And that event is available on the Daily Memphian. Just search for Women in Business or go to YouTube, search for Daily Memphian. We got Tina Sullivan, formerly of the Overton Park Conservancy, Ursula Madden, now at MLGW, but former TV, former City of Memphis, and Lee Mansberg from Junior Achievement, all gave great talks there. Mary Casciola from our office hosted that. But again, we're here with Tad Pierson, artist and self-employed entrepreneur. And let's talk a little bit about American Dream Safari. For those people have heard of it, but for those who haven't, how do you describe it?
Well, the American Dream Safari is really my my what's the French word for major effort?
Yes, good accent.
It's a tour company. I have a tour company. I have a 1955 Cadillac, give tours around Memphis and the Mississippi Delta, and also over the years, Nashville, Memphis, New Orleans. So it came to me in an epiphany. My grandfather had a 1950 Buick. My aunt let me have that after he died. And then I bought a 1953 Airstream trailer to go with it. And I had a French couple one time I met that wanted to come to the United States for a vacation, and they wanted to rent an old Cadillac like they'd seen in the movies. And it just floored me, like, God, that's the perfect Jack Kerouac road trip across the Western America. And started the tour company in 1989 with the Buick, and then I got this 55 Caddy. In the meantime, I was looking for quintessential American tour routes, Route 66, a New England Fall, Desert Southwest, and I've always been a big fan of blues music and the music, but it also represents a bigger story, who produced it, who created it in the beginning. And so I started my research, New Orleans to Memphis, through the Mississippi Delta, started writing letters to Robert Gordon and Jim O'Neill and Clark Stale, and just introducing myself to a lot of people in the region. 1995, September, I sold 4 tours from Memphis to New Orleans and back and forth. And that was my first season here. And I would say my big lucky break, speaking of Elvis, he's such a figure here in Memphis, but his pink Cadillac that's in the car museum out at Graceland is a 1955 Cadillac.
Oh, wow. So
mine's not pink. It's kind of Pecos beige is the official color, but it's a 55 Caddy. I did not need to explain myself to anybody, in the tourism business, like, why a 55 Caddy? It kind of fell in my lap, like there was Elvis. So anyway, there's Elvis, there's the blues, there's civil rights history, there's food, there's culture.
So the trip you're driving people and talking to them and kind of picking. So how from Memphis to New Orleans takes how long?
7 days. You know, 2 or 3 days in Memphis. Go to Al Green's church. Go to Beale Street. Hear some blues. Go to Wild Bill's. Eat at the Mississippi Four-Way Grill, just immersing ourselves in the local culture, getting some barbecue, and then hit the road, Clarksdale, Indianola, B.B. King's Blues Museum. I really am looking for the off the beaten path kind of stuff. I mean, my tour, as a tour guide, I'm not going to offer you you don't need me to take you to Dollywood or Graceland. Or I'm not, all for those, but you need me to show you the inner workings of the local culture, and that's what I love to do.
And you're spending 7 days. So this, as an introvert, I kind of fake it when I'm interviewing people, but the idea of spending 7 days with a couple of strangers is somewhere near, fate worse than death. I mean, but not for everyone.
Well, I'm a road guy. I mean, I spent my 20s and 30s, fashioning myself as a reincarnated Jack London, Jack Kerouac, Steinbeck, all that. So, for me, being in a car, riding down the road with smart friends or interesting customers, the worst thing you can do is bore me. Don't. Someone asked me, that who's my worst customer. I said, really, the worst customer is somebody who doesn't talk.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you dig Elvis?
That would be my best customer.
You dig the blues? Come on.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm sure people
give me
love
something
this.
to work with here.
Yeah, because you see, especially the European tourists come through. And they're so excited in a good way and so into it and trying to kind of get, and it's great that they go to Sun Studio and the Graceland and all that. I've been to Graceland 3 times in 30 years. I've enjoyed it every time. But again, this is so different.
You don't need me. I'm gonna take you where he went to high school, Lauderdale Courts, the backstory on Elvis, and then you go to Graceland. I encourage you to go to Graceland. I have an interesting psychological thought I'll throw at you, but it might affect your interview process. But riding in a car.
15 years into this, I really need some help.
Well, when you're driving in a car, it's almost the perfect place to have a real revealing conversation because we're not sitting there making eye contact. We're both just looking down the road. And so I toss you a big softball question. So Eric, what's the big moment in your life when you had to step up and really be, Eric Barnes, and then you're going to take that question and run with it, and we're not, so you're just talking to the road coming at you. And I have had, over the years, I've had some very interesting revelations. I had a tour last Saturday. Does the name Sputnik Monroe ring a bell?
Yeah.
The wrestler from the 50s and 60s. He's dead now, but his family was in town last weekend. His daughter daughter, son, and granddaughter were in town. Yeah. And I got to tour them around. That's amazing. It was really a fun tour.
The interview thing, or the talking to people, it is interesting. Like when my kids were younger, like taking them to school, we would have these great conversations because there's a sort of, you're looking ahead. Yeah. It's not a serious conversation with your parent. It's just and you would have this openness. And I know so many parents who, when their kids started to drive, they're like, well, I love having that time back. But on the other hand, there's so much incidental, but really great conversations that we have that we would miss. The other one I have on that is, and I'm guilty of doing this, is I can remember when I first started to fly, which was when I was about 3, like my earliest memories were flying.
Small plane.
Actually. No, big 747s.
Okay.
Just family stuff. And there was really nothing to distract you, right? You really could just feel, and they kept the windows open and you would feel the flight. And if you were like, I can remember being with my brother flying, there were all these conversations that he and I would have because we didn't have phones. We didn't have in-seat entertainment. We might have had coloring books or some toys or something. Right. And years of flying with my brother. My parents were divorced, so we were flying back and forth. There was all that, or even just flight was really kind of more like a road trip. Now it's like going to a Best Buy.
With a TV screen.
With a TV and noise and videos and all the windows are closed even during the day. And they're trying to mask the sensation of flight, which I think is a bummer.
Yeah. My early vacation memories, I think, are part of why I got in the tour business, but they were great road trips with, my parents driving and you'd be in the back seat. And I'd have a coloring book, but we'd talk, certainly listen to music, and just watch the landscape go by and kind of, it's a dream machine, really.
I remember last one for me is I lived in Tacoma, Washington, out west, and I went to school in Connecticut in college, and I drove back and forth numerous times. So 4 days. Yeah. And I did it a number of times alone. I only did it with someone once, which I did not like. It was a person I didn't really know. wasn't their fault. It's just
Oh,
going back to what I said before.
I mean,
4
you're
days.
right. Being stuck in a car with someone you're not enjoying their company with can be
tough.
painful.
That was really tough. But I did it without a radio, or without a tape player or CD player or anything. And I remember that was one of those trips. Was the first time I heard Rush Limbaugh. I would listen to farm reports, or I would drive 200 miles in total silence.
Yeah.
And actually, there is something really magical about that especially when you're not in the cities and you're just out in the middle of Montana or
it's
Nebraska.
a great place to do I do some of my best thinking,
Yeah.
when I'm on the road but I mean, a 10-hour drive by the 8th hour, you've kind of like gone through every thought you can have, and you need some distraction.
With a couple of minutes left here with Tad Pierson, before we started, Holly Whitfield walked through, scared the heck out of me with El Perry because they were behind us in this place, didn't know, they were saying hi.
Yeah.
Indoor trailer park. Holly brought it up.
Well, my personal addiction is Airstream trailers. I spot them and I just daydream about having one. And when I started the tour business, I had a 1953 Airstream trailer. Then I bought a 1956 Airstream trailer. And I just like the design of trailers. Well, in 2007, I moved into a building downtown near Madison and Danny Thomas and just stuffed all my trailers in there and the cars. And that was going to be my workshop and my base of operations. And slowly people started dropping off pink flamingos and potted plants and outdoor chairs. And it became this indoor trailer park. And so people knew me or knew the place as the indoor trailer park. And I had some great parties there, some great wedding receptions. It was just decorated as an indoor trailer park. And that's the way I wanted to live. I got my shop. The trailers function as my bedroom.
Yeah.
I've got a little shower and a bathroom and a little makeshift kitchen. And so my whole world is in one building. Office, home, workshop. So that's the indoor trailer park.
And last thing, are you from Memphis?
I grew up in Kansas. My tour business brought me here in 95. I've been here, if I make it to September, I'll be here 30 years.
Yeah, see, I think 95 is about fall 95, but we're about on the same path there.
Yeah.
Last question that I always try to ask everybody is, what was the first concert you went to?
Steppenwolf.
Ooh, that's a first.
About 1969, and I was living in a small town in Kansas, and some friends and we drove over to Wichita. I think four of us split a 6-pack of beer, and we went in, and we saw Steppenwolf. And I remember when it was keep the motor running, it was a great anthem song, but they had one song, "Damn the Pusher Man." If you know that song, Anyway, and that was kind of their encore, and the lights came on. And I remember thinking, I was kind of naive, and I hadn't, experienced much of it. And I was like, man, damn the Pusher Man. That's scary rock, And
about how old were you?
16, something like that.
Yeah.
17,
that's good. Steppenwolf.
That was my first big national band playing at that Coliseum in Wichita. I'd seen bands at the Armory and the VFW in my hometown, but we drove over to Wichita. So
that's pretty good. That's good. Tad Pierson. Again, people can go to Facebook, search for Tire Art Design, Tad, or search for Tad Pierson, and you can learn much more about all these things. But that is all the time we have this week. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Very great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If you missed any of the show today, you can get the full episode online at the Daily Memphian at WYXR. You can search for Daily Memphian on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify. We will see you next week.